Today's ComputerCraft video is going to be making an inventory system, a filter system that moves items out of your inventory when you're mining to an external chest or an applied energistics system that could be really far away or in a different dimension, and as long as it's chunk loaded, it'll move items for you. I'll give a quick demonstration of how it works, and then I'll show how to make it if you're interested. Right now, you can't see the tags. 3H on the keyboard turns on these tags, and I have it set up right now to only move forge raw materials and forge ores. It won't move tags like forged gems or the many other tags that these items have, and of course it won't move food. I only have two tags set up, ores and raw materials. So to get this program, if you just type in pastebin get and then that exact code, it'll bring a working version of this program I'm going to keep saved in my pastebin. And then you can just name this test whatever, doesn't matter, .lua, downloads it. Edit test.lua. So for the most part, all you have to tweak is this tag filter. You can add to it. These are the only two tag matches I have set up. You just extend this table. You could change the keyword to trigger it, on or off. And then up. Up is the only other thing that matters. It's just the direction of the chest. I'm using this clear chest, so it's up obviously. Control R to run. So the program is running right now. And just to confirm that, when you type the command or on, you'll get feedback where it replies. And it happened so quickly, it moved all the items that matched into here. And then if you're out mining and you don't want stuff going right back to your base, you can type in or off. And then it replies back that it's off. So this was filmed in the Direwolf20 1.18 mod pack using ComputerCraft tweaked and advanced peripherals, the inventory manager block, and the chat box. There's a memory card in here that has to be bound to the player for the inventory interaction to work. And then this is my external inventory. Obviously, you'd use something more interesting than just a chest, or filter.lua. Local inventory manager equals peripheral dot find inventory manager. So this is going to wrap this block, this inventory manager, to the computer so it can use it and it can interact with the player's inventory. This part in the string actually matters, the spelling. It has to be inventory, capital M manager, and this is just a variable I decided to use. I'll show the docs here in a second, but I'll just keep typing this out. These are the official docs for the mod, the advanced peripherals mod, the inventory manager. This is the name that I was talking about where the spelling matters. And then I'm just borrowing a code from their example. Local manager equals this chunk here. And then what they also do is they do a check that if it doesn't find it, generate an error. The only function out of the many functions out of here that I'm going to use, I believe, are we'll do a get tables, or get items function rather, that gets the table, the player's inventory, and then removing the items. Talk about those later. There's a bunch of other cool things, but those are the only two this program uses. And then while I'm here, I might as well look at the chat box. Same thing, chat box, spelling matters, and then they have a couple code snippets in here. I think I use the send message to player. And what else? They have an example script in here. And I borrow kind of this chunk of code here. It's always nice to look at this stuff for inspiration. So on the ComputerCraft Reddit, somebody was giving me some tips on my program, and I'm going to implement some of their changes. I'll type it first, then I will try to explain it. So we have these variables looking for these blocks. And if it can find them, great. it can't find them, if there's empty airspaces, there's nothing around the computer, it will generate these errors. If I blow that one away, I do Control R to run. We have a first error here. Line 7, missing the end. Of course, I forgot that one, and then that one's just out of view. Control S, Control R. Chat box not found. We put it back. Control R to run it again, and the program finished, no errors. That's a good start. I don't know if this is a good way to show a concept, but what I'm going to try to do is build the program as I built it and not just copy my program directly. So it'll take longer to get my point across, but I think it's more helpful. So what this piece of text does is it basically builds a table or an array. So every time there is a OS pull event that's filtered for chat, so anytime there's player chat, this array gets populated. This event array will start at 1 in Lua and then go to 2, 3, 4, and it will populate. And this is a piece of code I think I found off just Googling ComputerCraft and OS pull events. OS pull event CC tweaked. We get their docs page, and I'm using this pull event, and the filter I'm using is chat in quotations. This part will be interesting later, but I'll just mention it now. This function yields the current process and waits for it to be resumed. So that's going to matter later. I just wanted to point that out now. Here's a bit of an example of how to use it, and I've of course Googled for other examples, not just using the docs, but even just finding various forums or discussions where people are trying to seek help. It always helps to look at other examples. What's interesting though is if you go to these events, these are all the possible events that you can use in the default version of ComputerCraft. But if we go back to the chat box page, they actually have added an event, which I didn't notice for the longest time, but the event that I'm filtering, chat, this keyword, this is actually getting me parameter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it gets the event type, it gets who typed it, it gets the message, it even gets their player UUID string. Then Boolean hidden, I don't exactly understand how that comes into play. All right, if I just do a print event just to see what happens, and the while loop, and that doesn't have to be indented. Control S, Control R. This is a test. We get a table, which is kind of meaningless. Stop this. For E in value, in pairs event, do print A, B, end. So this is just kind of a standard loop that I've seen used lots in ComputerCraft examples, and it's a common, how do I say this? This is common in Lua, so if it looks weird to you, definitely look for some other examples. Basically, K is just shorthand. People type keys or values, or sometimes it doesn't matter, just variable names. And then in pairs. So it's going to loop through this table that's being built, and it's going to print the first value and the second value of the table. Control S, Control R. I just hit up on the keyboard, chat event, test. Da, 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 da. So these are my 3 chat messages. This is a test, this is the test, and this second. And every time that event gets returned, so the same information is here that we saw on the docs page for the chat box. Event 1 is the chat type, or it's the event type, which is chat. It's my username, it's my message, it's my player UUID, and this is the Boolean hidden false, which I don't know what that means. That's how that works. Okay, looking at the next chunk of code that I have here, if event element 3 in the table equals or on, then chat box, which is cb from up here dot send message to player. That's the function of this block. The first piece is going to be the message to send to me, and then second part is going to be who to send it to, and event 2 happens to be me, the player. Of course, referencing the docs again, parameter 1 is the type, event 2 is my username, and event 3 is the message. That's where that's coming from. And then of course the function I'm using, it tells me it has to be a string, and the next piece you need is the user to send it to, and then the third piece, if you want, is the prefix, but apparently it doesn't need that. If it needed it, it would generate an error saying it expected a third element in this function, but there's no error. I just realized I don't like using tabs because it's taking away from my small window, so I've just used spaces. And in Lua, doesn't matter. And I just realized I have a typo. So this is where we check if the message is or on or off, and then it sends it to the player. Control S, Control R. So or on, we get the response back, or off, we get the response back, and then you can also just type it again. So the next thing I want to do is I need to toggle a flag to make this inventory scanner work. I don't want it running all the time and scanning my inventory or removing items from my inventory, because that could be annoying if you're trying to do something and items keep getting pulled out of your inventory every 10 seconds. So you want to be able to disable it, and I'm going to use a flag for that. Filter equals true. Filter equals false. So turn it on. We ask it and turn it off. Right now, because we haven't established it, or whatever you call it, it's nil. The value is nil when we first run it. So I think it's good practice to make it a local filter and just assign it false off the start. So it's always just off every time you run the program. And you have to ask for it to be on, and then you turn it off. So what's coming next is something that's still kind of new to me, but I believe what's happening in the code I have so far is while true do, it's just indefinitely looping through this. But I think this local event, this OS pull event, from what I've read, it kind of yields the program. Like it just stops and it waits until it gets that event. So nothing else really happens. Which is a problem, because if we do turn on this filter system and it's running, and we have later code down here that's actually moving items out, that code won't run, because as soon as this while loop runs again, as soon as it gets here and there's been no more chat events, it just stops and waits. And to prove that, I just do a print, will I run? Probably should be a question mark in there. Control S, Control R. So we're walking around, we don't see any chats. I guess the message is going to show up in here, but nothing shows up. But it will after I type in anything, actually. So I typed anything in, and that ran. Even though none of these messages matched, it still had this event. So then it ran through the rest of the code, and then it reset, and now it's just waiting again at this line. That's a problem. And there's kind of an interesting solution. This is where it gets into the weeds a little bit. Is if we make this entire thing a function. Local function chat listener. I guess I have to indent all this stuff again. Okay, so I squeezed this whole loop into a local function which has its own end statement. This is ending the function, and then this is ending the while loop. This is ending the if statement. I just realized I had that stuff indented too far. That if statement's on the same level as the local event. Okay, so this is one function. If you're following along, this is one snapshot of the code so far. We have established our boilerplate at the top. Nothing's going to change there. I'll be adding more variables here later, but for now, this is good. And now I want to make another function. Scroll down. Too bad this window is so small. Local, and I might as well end it. I'll forget that. Here's the second function, local function push items. And every time it gets called, I want it to just tell me that it's getting called. And the OS sleep event, is important because it yields. Basically, this function might run, and then as soon as it gets to this event and it waits, it yields and it lets another piece of code run. So then it'll let this piece of code run, and as soon as it gets to sleep, it yields and it comes back and forth. It's kind of like a parallel thing. This is the part that's new to me. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that right, but from the examples that I've read online, you need it. Otherwise, it will just stick and hang and wait. This kind of lets you run things in parallel. And I think by default, it's only 1 second. So I'd like it to be every, I guess, 2 seconds for this demonstration. So the third kind of chunk of code is wait for any, not all, and then I can tab to autocomplete. And this is where we type in the two functions, chat listener and push items. So basically, the code that we have so far, scrolling at the top, everything gets set up, we have our variable set. The function doesn't run because it's not called, and this function doesn't run because it's not called. It goes right to here, parallel, wait for any. And then it just runs one, runs the other, and they yield to each other. Now the one catch is if you ever do a return, like some functions you can do return, then it stops. The program will actually just end once this function gets a return. So the trick with this program that I'm doing is never return anything. So I do Control S and Control R. The push items function ran, and it finished. I wasn't expecting that. So I forgot to put in the while loop. So both of these functions actually have to be in a while loop, and even though they're running indefinitely, while true do, the event here, this OS pull event, and the sleep actually yield, and they actually take a break and let something else run, is my understanding. So now it should work. So every 2 seconds, it runs that push items function, and then it also waits for a command. So if I was to type in or on or off, it gets those messages and it still runs, and like a parallel thing. If I was to comment out the sleep and just run it, it actually just locks up. I think it's gonna generate an error in like 7 seconds if it doesn't. Yeah. So another overview of the program, we're detecting if we want the filter to run up here, and then now we want to actually push the items to the chest. So the code that I'm going to be typing is, I think, 3 or 4 actually loops. So it's going to have to loop through all the slots in the player inventory and check all the tags. And you don't want that running all the time, right? So that's where that filter variable that I made, filter true, filter false, comes in. If the filter, then, so it's just saying if, it's shorthand for if true. If the filter's true, then do this code. Throw the end on right away. The new variable, it's going to be a table. So this is the function that we saw at the beginning in the docs for the inventory manager. It returns a table of the player's inventory. just to see how that works. If we do for K and V in pairs by inf do print K and V end. So for each key and the value in this table, print them. Control S, Control R. Now the catch is it's only going to do that. I've turned off all the messages, so we don't actually know if the program is running, but it's only going to print anything if my inventory has something in it. If I grab this and that, the next thing is we have to type or on for that flag to be true. And every 2 seconds, it should print slot 0, which is here, and then at slot 20 is here. And this is an actual table. And that table it's returning at slot 20. I can prove that by saying we know this is slot 8. That's slot 0, 8. This should start changing to 8, 0, and 8. And that's all the data about this item. All the tags, all the MBT data, stack size, the enchantments. It's got all this information for these items. If we type or off, and if I move this around, you should see that the table's not populating any more information because we've turned the flag off. It's stuck at 0 and 8. Now, another tip that somebody gave me on the Reddit was instead of just typing in for K and V all the time, it's kind of non-descriptive. I know the key is actually the slot number, 0 through 8 or whatever. And I know the value is item. So for each slot and each item, I guess, how do you say that? For each item in each slot, do this. Slot item. Actually, this was just for demonstration. Here comes another loop because we have another table we have to go through. Okay, for this next loop, for K and V in pairs, item.tags. How do I prove that I know? Okay, for the next for loop. So it's a loop inside a loop. We're going through each item in each slot, and then for each key and value, and I'm leaving these purposely vague. I will clarify them later. It's just easier for me to do it like this, I think. So we're going to go through each item and go through that table and just see what it looks like. Just type that. Control S, Control R. And we have to turn the filter on. Okay, so I should turn the filter off. If I can read this. Where does it start? I guess it doesn't really matter. Display name. Steak. Name. Minecraft cooked beef. So when it says display name, that is actually the key. And this piece is the value. So the name is the key. Minecraft cooked beef is the value. So now instead of looping through all the items, we can actually specify we want item.count. Count part of this table. Now if we loop through, print a, I guess since there's no table, I can also do this part that I was trying to show earlier to prove that it works. Or on. Might as well grab another item. 27, bad argument. Table expected, got a number. Sorry. I'm actually wrong. I don't know why I thought it was count. It's actually tags. Because we're trying to filter the tag data, the forge ores for moving items. But this chunk, that still work? I don't know. We're using the tag portion. This should work. Control R or on. Okay, good. Or off. This will be tough to look at, but basically the tag key, cooked beef, tools netherite, advanced netherite pickaxe, upgrade to iron, elemental infusible pickaxes, blah blah blah. There's a lot of tag data there. That's because this only has 2 chunks, 2 tags. Hold control for tags. This one has a lot. That's probably a terrible example. Keeping with tradition about renaming things. Now that I kind of know what data I'm getting back, I can actually update this. Apparently it's common to do an underscore if it doesn't really matter. It's just a throwaway index. The value we know is tag. All right, I've put yet another for loop in a for loop in a for loop. There's a lot of tables in Minecraft's inventory system. So what we're trying to do now is when we actually drill down to the item and we were getting the tags that it has back, now we want to actually cross-reference the tags in there with a master list, the stuff that we actually want to move. And for that, I've made a new variable tag filter. If we go to the top here, where we put our variables, I don't really know if it matters if I stick, because down here I did local inv down here. I think this is just nicer if players have to, if somebody else has to adjust the file to keep anything that somebody else has to modify. I think it's better to have it at the top. That makes sense. So this isn't just an empty array this time. It's actually going to be filled with data. Forge ore. Now I could get rid of the forge ore and it would match a lot more stuff. Like it would match, maybe not that, but I feel like using the full tag is better to not have an accidental match. And then forge raw materials. The reason I did that is if I go to ore, no, if I go to iron, we're going to match with iron ore that has the forge ores tag. Technically, it's actually forge ores, not that it matters. It'll match a partial. And then raw materials. And we could even do something, you know, annoying, like if we went to rotten meat, you know, you're always out mining and killing zombies, you could add a big list of stuff. So potentially this list could be really large. It might actually be helpful to have another file where you list everything and then have this program read that other file. Okay, so this is where we cross-reference that filter that we just set. So here is the next chunk. Once we're looking at a specific item and the specific tags, we are going to check the table, the tag table, see if anything matches the tag filter. So to do that, Lua has this string.find function, string.find, and you can read about it online if you Google Lua and string.find. Basically, you pass it tag, and tag, if I can remember, is what it's doing is it's going to loop through every single one of these tags. Forge ores in ground, forge ores iron, elemental craft, mine colonies, etc. And every single one of those it's going to loop through, and we're going to try to match. So in this case, forge ores is at the bottom, so it's actually going to loop through like, what, 8 tags before it gets a match, which is fine. Computers are fast. So if there is a match, then set match to true. Well, that also means at the top here, I should add another local variable to match. And you also have to do that, set them both to false. And if you don't know, this false corresponds with this filter, and then the second false corresponds with match. And we want those false when this program starts. But if there is a match, set it to true. And after you set it to true, break. So after we break out of this function, I have to exit out of these loops. 1, 2, 3, I think. Hard for me to actually see myself. I'm referencing old code that I've written. If match, then end. So the inventory manager that we made at the beginning, we're going to reference the remove item from player. And if I didn't mention this, this is an actual function from the inventory manager block, and you have to spell it right. If not, it will not work. This is up. This is where my crystal chest is. Item dot count. All right, trying to go through this from the beginning-ish. We get the inventory, the entire inventory, and through every single slot, we check each item. And for each item, we check the tag list. And then we go through every tag. We try to find a match for anything that's in my tag filter that I put above. If there is a match, we set this flag, this match flag to true. We break out of the loops. And then what that does is, if there's a match, it will take that item, because we use this reference here, item.count, so the exact count, in this case, 2 steaks, it would know, and at what slot it's at, because of this inventory manager function. Looking at the inventory manager again, remove item from player. You have to give it a direction of the chest, you have to give it a count of how many to move, and then these next two are optional. But if you don't give it a slot, it will just pick a random item. And if you don't give it an item name, it will just pick a random, it'll move whatever item's in that slot. So I actually didn't give it an item to move. I'm just saying, here's the direction, here's the count, those things matter. And then I do give it a slot just so it's not a random slot. That's how that function works. And it gives you a bit of a story here as to how that works. Hopefully it's obvious, but if you were to put this in the wrong spot, you'd have issues. It definitely matters where this if statement is. So just be aware of that and cross-reference my pastebin link. Basically, it knows exactly what the count is because it has that information still, and it knows the slot because it still has that information from, where is it? Slot and item count. See how I used item.tags here? I got confused with item count. It's because I use it down here. The best way to see inside of a loop what's going on is to make printing statements like I've done. See what's going on inside these loops. So I think that's it. Now I also want to slow this down every 5 seconds. Control S, Control R. Look at that. Unfinished string near up. Of course. Control S, Control R. So, or on. Now, if we were to pick up a few pieces of iron or a few pieces of deep slate cobble, and it doesn't matter how quickly you're mining or what slot, it loops through the entire inventory every 5 seconds and moves everything that has a match. What about these? 3 crushed ores. See, those don't have a tag match. If I was really vague and just had a tag match of ores, it would catch it. Something I'm going to have to play with. I haven't actually played with this in my vanilla world yet. I've just been building it in the creative world. And then as you could see, you could have automatic ore processing. I hit F3 and G, it brings up the chunk. So as long as this was chunk loaded, I could be in the nether, I could be in the end, or really far away, and this would be processing my own. I had that chunk loaded. So the only other thing I think I would add to this program is, under the advice of somebody in the ComputerCraft Reddit, was to do, after this event 3, which if you remember is the command when the, or is the player's chat message, is if you throw another function lower, or if you pass it through another function. And this is kind of new to me too. I've never really seen colons and then lower, but basically whatever message you get, it just puts it all lowercase and then checks it. Because actually if we erase this and only have lower for the OR on but not the OR off, you'll see Control S, Control R. If we do capital OR for on, something like that, it works. But if we were to do the same thing for off, interesting. Oh no, it didn't work. That's my message, duh. Well, I guess that's it. There'll be a pastebin file, and I'll make sure to mark it YouTube in my pastebin so I know not to delete it. And the code should always be there if somebody wants to use it or modify it. An interesting thing would be to have another file in your advanced computer that actually has a list of tags that you could just load